Good evening, everybody, and welcome to the August meeting for Mildura Rural City Council. I'll go straight to the prayer. Almighty God, we who are gathered together in council pledge ourselves to work in harmony for the welfare and development of our rural city. Guide us, we pray, in our deliberations. Help us to be fair in our judgment and wise in our actions, so that prosperity and happiness shall be the lot of our people. Amen. I would also like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land on which we are meeting and pay my respects to both elders past and present. Good evening and welcome again to the August virtual ordinary meeting of Council, this Wednesday the 25th of August 2021. I welcome councillors, management and staff and those members of the public viewing the live stream or watching the recording at a later time. As part of our efforts to contain the spread of COVID-19 and in accordance with Section 395 of the Local Government Act 2020, this council meeting is being held by virtual means and live streamed on Council's website. It is therefore not open to the public to attend in person. Tonight, some meeting participants are attending at a council office to the proceedings. This is to ensure they have an appropriate internet connection. Councillors are located in private rooms by themselves in accordance with the Chief Health Officer's directions. They are not required to wear a mask unless someone else enters the room with them. Several participants are joining from their homes and are therefore also not wearing masks. There are a number of requirements for the holding of a virtual council meeting. Firstly, in order for councillors to be recorded as present at the meeting, each councillor must confirm they can hear proceedings, they can see all other councillors in attendance, be seen by all other councillors in attendance, and they can be heard to speak. When we move to agenda item 3, councillors present, I will ask all councillors to confirm this. Secondly, it's a requirement that all virtual meetings of council are made accessible to the public by being streamed live on council's website. A quorum for a meeting of our council is 5 councillors. If for some reason the quorum requirement is not able to be met during the meeting due to councillors experiencing technical difficulties, we will temporarily adjourn the meeting and attend to restore the connection for those councillors. This will also be the case should we experience technical difficulties with the live stream. Should we encounter significant technical difficulties that do not allow today's council meeting to continue at all, the meeting will be adjourned and those items on the agenda that have not been considered will be deferred for consideration by council to a later date, of which we will advise members of the public. When voting tonight, I will ask councillors to raise their hand. Please keep your hand raised until I have confirmed all councillors have voted and I ask you to lower your hand. Should any councillors wish to speak to an item, please raise your hand and I will call upon you in the order that you have raised your hands. The audio-video recordings from tonight's virtual council meeting will be published on council's website within 48 hours of this meeting concluding, meeting's conclusion. So we'll go to those who are present and I'll just work through the councillors and I'll start with Deputy Mayor Helen Healy. Can you hear me, Helen, and can you see all other councillors?
Yes, I can hear and see everybody. Thank you.
I'll just work around the screen now. Councillor Jodie Reynolds, can you see and hear all other councillors?
Yes, good evening, Mr. Mayor. I can see and hear all the other councillors.
Councillor Liam Wood, can you see and hear all other councillors?
I can see and hear all other councillors. Thank you.
Councillor Cindy Power, can you see and hear all other councillors?
Hello, I can see and hear all other councillors.
Councillor Glenn Milne, can you see and hear all other councillors?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, I can see and hear all councillors.
Councillor Mark Eckel, can you see and hear all other councillors?
Yes, good evening, Mr. Mayor. I can see and hear all councillors. Thank you.
Councillor Stefano De Pieri, can you see and hear all other councillors?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, I can see and I can hear everyone.
Councillor Ianani, can you see and hear all other councillors?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, I can see and hear all other councillors.
Thank you very much for that, councillors. We will now move on with the rest of the meeting. We go to item 4, apologies and absences, and there are none. Thank you. We move on to item 5, which is confirmation of minutes, which is the ordinary meeting of council held on the 28th of July this year, and the confidential meeting of council in confidence on the 28th of July this year. Do I have a mover for that item? Councillor
Move,
Eckel,
Mr.
thank you
Mayor.
very much. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Milne, thank you very much. I'll now put the motion. All those in favour? Thank you, everybody. The motion is carried. We now move to item 6, which is the confirmation of council auspiced meetings, with a recommendation that council note the following records of council auspiced meetings. We have a draft Mildura CBD access and mobility strategy briefing on the 15th of July, a planning forum on the 26th of July, and a council forum on the 11th of August. Could I have a mover for that recommendation, please? Councillor Healy, could I please have a seconder? Councillor De Pieri. I will now put the motion. All those in favour? Thank you, councillors. The motion is carried. We now move on to item 7, notification of absences, and I believe there are none. We now move on to item 8, the mayoral report, and 8.1 with the recommendation that council note the contents of this report. Could I have a mover for that motion, please? Councillor Milne, a seconder. Councillor Power. I will now put that recommendation. All those in favour? The motion is carried. Thank you very much, councillors. We now move to councillor reports with a recommendation at 9.1 that council note the contents of this report. Could I have a mover?
Move with the report. Thanks,
Move
Mr.
with the
Mayor.
report, Councillor Eckel. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Healy. I'm happy to hear Councillor Eckel's report and then Councillor Healy's, and I'll move through to other councillors after that, if that's okay.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Mayor, I'm going to move this report under my portfolio of culture, arts, and history, heritage. Mr. Mayor, culture is our being, the arts are the expression of our being, and heritage is the history of our being. By this, we mean that culture is about people, who we are. And I have 3 people that I'd like to acknowledge within our community, Mr. Mayor, that have had outstanding contribution to life and to learning, and raised the profile of this community by the work that they have espoused. Mildura resident Professor Bridie Raban has been awarded by the Hong Kong Baptist University an announcement that she has been conferred a honorary university fellowship on 7, and there's also 7 distinguished persons in recognition of their outstanding contribution being made too. And this will be presented in a couple of weeks. Professor Bridie's outstanding career bears witness with having published 64 books, 58 chapters in books, 30 research reports, and 84 journal articles. Also at this time, it's opportune to recognise one of our own, Councillor Stefano De Pieri, a Lifetime Achievement Award from the University of Melbourne, awarded to an individual who has made an outstanding long-term and internationally recognised contribution to their field of endeavour. He is currently the patron of the Melbourne-based Institute of Post-Colonial Studies, looking among other things at the future of food and regional communities. Unfortunately, the third person, Mr. Mayor, is no longer with us. I bring to the notice of councillors and of the late, great Jeff Evans, wonderful community member who passed away since our last meeting. Jeff needs no introduction to any of the councillors or to the community as such. Has been his contribution to this community as a musician and a supporter of people and organisations in need of assistance over many, many years, and a man of the river, great river captain, and a man who had a great passion for this mighty river systems that we have here in Australia and enjoy. An esteemed music icon in this community and beloved by thousands of people, not just around Australia, but overseas. Jeff's love for this community and love of river life was legendary. We offer our condolences to Joy and his large family. Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you for the report, Councillor Eckel. I will now move to Councillor Healy.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. And thank you for your report, Councillor Eckel. To follow on from that, I've been approached by a number of musicians in Mildura who would like to see people like Jeff acknowledged, and it's something we're exploring at the moment. So my report tonight, I do have 5 things, and just quickly, I was really touched by the Murrayville Community College newsletter in July, talking about lockdown learning, how things are deteriorating, the level of fatigue developing with this type of learning of school students in our community, particularly school students who live on the border, and the challenges that they have around living in a cross-border community. For instance, their football grand final they can't attend, which has been cancelled. Ironically, they missed the Pinaroo Mental Health Week that they were going to participate in, and obviously sorely need. I've kept in contact with the principal there, Natasha Muddy, and just seeing how things are going, and she's reported to me that year 9 and 10 are particularly struggling. And I hope we as a council can reach out to our schools and ask if there's anything that we can do. I did offer to like send little cards congratulating people who are doing well or whatever, but just to keep an eye on our student and school community, I think it's really, really important. My second item is I've been tasked with reading 47 nominations for leadership and continuous improvement for the Employee Recognition Awards. And I just wish every councillor could read them, although it's a big job and we've got a deadline with the mayor for tomorrow at 3 o'clock to have them all read. But I am just so impressed with the depths of continuous improvement, innovation, adaptation, and community collaborations going on with our council. And I hope you get a chance to read some of them, particularly the ones that created the social responses to COVID-19 emergency reliefs, the incredible partnerships and cross-sector relationships. I've just been really, really impressed, and I look forward to the Employee Recognition Awards where we can see some of these stars stand up and accept their award. The third thing I want to talk about was the Mildura Writers Festival is, as you may aware, we support the festival, and it couldn't go ahead this year because of the border closures and a lot of writers concerned about getting trapped in particular states. But it recently went online, and I do urge you to go online and watch some of the amazing talks of the lineup who are coming here in a very generously recorded talks or interviews. But I particularly draw your attention to the Murray talk, and it's delivered by Judith Nangala Crispin, and it's incredible. And the Murray talk was established, as Councillor De Perry very well knows, in honour of our patron Les Murray and in honour of our lifeblood of a river. My fourth one is just a bit of an update on the Ministerial Advisory Committee I sit on to attain parity by 2024 in the elections, and the aim of the Minister for Local Government and the Office for Women with this advisory committee to is explore the barriers and system and structural barriers, and also strategies to how to achieve parity by 2024. So the aim is not only to have a gender balance around the council table, but also to have an intersectional diversity around the table too that truly represents our community. And my final report is on the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change report that was released on the 9th of August. And this is the United Nations body for assessing all the science related to climate change. Now, they've come up with a warning on Code Red for humanity on avoiding dangerous climate change. The report concluded that major climate change is affecting every region on the Earth in multiple ways, and that it is inevitable, irreversible, and unequivocally caused by humans. Among its findings are that greenhouse gas emissions have to peak by 2025. That's only 4 years. And all coal and gas-fired power stations must close in 10 years. It's almost a 4,000-page report. Not that I've read the whole thing, but I've looked at the highlights. And encouraging is that there is a sense of hope.
A little less
And
than
I'm-
1 minute left, Helen.
Yep. So on that note, I am so proud of the work our council is doing since it became the 94th council out of 562 in Australia to declare a climate change emergency. And I look at what we've achieved through solar panels, through projects, through the Victorian Energy Collaboration, our towards zero emissions strategy, our electric vehicles, our transition to zero emissions, our recently formed Climate Emergency Action Group, and the different actions, including to be launched very soon, the first electric car power charging station that will be in Oyun. And I also agree with Councillor De Pieri on this note that we must future-proof ourselves further by purchasing more water. But I just want to finish off by saying how proud I am to belong to a council that is showing leadership in this space, because there will be a price for Australia to pay diplomatically and economically for its stubborn resistance to moving to a low-carbon world. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Healy. Is there any other councillors who would like to speak to their reports? Councillor Milne and then Councillor Reynolds.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm not sure whether this fits in as a report or a question, but it is a little bit elongated, so I'll give it as a report and let you decide. It's in regard to the federal government announcement of the establishment of an ag visa. And I think everybody's well aware of that. The Australian Table Grape Association has been fighting for this visa concept for many years, and see it as one of the major solutions to the massive labour shortage faced by horticulturists in Sunraysia. A survey of the table grape growers prior to last season's harvest estimated that the industry needs a labour force of close to 15,000 people to harvest their crop. The success of the ag visa will be contingent on having suitable quarantine hubs for the workers to isolate upon their arrival in Australia. So talking to the Table Grape Growers Association, they're asking us and the community to consider a proposal that would see the success of the rollout of this visa, and that is to offer Mildura as a place to establish a quarantine hub. There are many factors that would be favourable to establishing such a hub, and that is the Mildura Airport can accommodate international jets.
Yep.
They can fly directly into Mildura without risking any other state capital. Mildura is sufficiently isolated from major cities. People could be transferred by bus to a quarantine hub. They've suggested maybe Lake Coleraine or something like that would be an ideal venue given the existing infrastructure. And there's also the potential to gain federal and state funds to upgrade and enhance facilities. There could be a plane coming every 2 weeks to ensure a steady stream of workers. Now, this is something that would take a bit of work, and you couldn't do lightly, and you'd have to have some community consultation, etc. The table grape industry has offered itself to undertake a pilot program if the ag visa is required, and the offer has been made to our local member, Anne Webster. There are many variables that would need to be discussed and sorted out, but it would be great to see the support of MRCC, or this is what they're seeking. But I would suggest that we need to look at a meeting maybe with the Economic Development Board, the Table Grape Growers Association, and Webster, and others that might have information to put into a proposal like this, remembering that our table grape industry is worth close to $800 million to the Sunraysia community. And if the growers face a labour shortage, the economic loss could be huge. Now, this is something that I could see could create some angst in the community, but I think we should have that discussion, remembering what it's worth to us. And as far as having people fly in, well, if they're going to work in our community, I think you've got to take responsibility for every part or every stage of a project like this, and sort it out in your own community. But I would like to see us explore that if we could, at least. And you know, a lot of work to do. So I don't know if that's a question
No, I'm happy
or
to
a
take that
report.
I'm happy to take it as a report. I think it's very, very important, Councillor Milne, and we'll, through the managers, look into creating a meeting with the state and the federal member and the other organisations that you've mentioned.
Yeah.
So very much appreciative of that.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank
That's
you.
the end of my report.
Thank you, Mr. Milne. Councillor Reynolds.
Sorry, looking for the mute button.
Are you all good, Councillor Reynolds?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I would like to report to the council that during the week I was contacted by Councillor Nikki McKay, who's a Swan Hill Rural City Councillor. She contacted me to let me know that their council has recently put forward and passed a motion that will require them to write to their local members and to request from their local members that, and I'll just get that up so that I can read that out for you, that Afghan residents on temporary visas be fast-tracked for consideration for permanent residency, and that priority be given to reuniting families in view of the dangerous situation in Afghanistan. So I'd just like to congratulate the Swan Hill City Council for taking the initiative and being leaders in this area. The situation in Afghanistan has been, you know, shocking over the last sort of couple of weeks. The events there that are terrible and saddening, and they leave us all with heavy hearts. And here in Mildura, we have such a big, successful Afghanistani community, and I reach out to them and I say that we're thinking about you at this time, and we're thinking about your families, and that we hope that everybody in your extended family is safe. As part of that, I think that it would be terrific if Mildura Rural City Councillors could actually also write to our federal member, echo the sentiments that the Swan Hill City Council have done, and take that a little bit further and to suggest that bring Afghani people here. We've got a really successful community here. We've got really successful structures here for bringing people into our community. We've got SMEC, which are doing such a great job in that area, and we've got the space and we've got the jobs for the people when they arrive here. You know, talking about agricultural areas, we know that when we get people from migrant backgrounds, you know, they're hardworking, genuine people who make a huge contribution to our communities in general. So if we could work together as councillors, and I've spoken to my fellow councillors about this, I'm pleased to say that they're all very supportive of this. I think that and I'm just so pleased and proud of everybody from that perspective. So I'm looking forward to what we might be able to achieve there for our Afghani communities. And secondly, Mr. Mayor, I'd like to report that on the 19th of July, I went to a meeting of the Central Victorian Greenhouse Alliance Group. And I just thought I'd just talk to you a little bit about the work that they're doing there. And it sort of follows on from what Councillor Helen Healy was just talking about with our climate emergency and our IPCC report, because the CVGA is an excellent partner for councillors in making really concrete solutions to our climate problems. And I'll just go through a couple of them for you, and that have been really successful and are making a big difference on the ground. And that is the local government power purchase agreement. So 46 councils have entered into long-term electricity supply agreements for 100% renewable electricity for council operations, which includes streetlights, town halls and small buildings, for etc. Charging the regions, which continues to roll out to 20 sites over 13 councils. Last year, $6 million for additional state government funding supported the rollout of charges in regional areas across Victoria, and $6 million has recently been announced for 50 sites across Victoria. as part of the Victoria Government's zero emission vehicle roadmap. So CVGA has been an excellent partner for councils in that. Road lighting upgrades, and the Keep It Cool, which is the public tree planting efforts that CVGA have been doing. They've finalised stage 2 of that, and that's been a fantastic project. They've actually been able to identify throughout that project about 50 species of tree, which will have the benefits to this area of cooling the ground, and that they will be very stable and strong trees in the face of climate changes, which we're going to be affected by later. So when we are being affected by now. So the CVGA doing great work, and happy to answer anybody's questions if they've got further questions about what the CVGA has been up to over the last couple of months. Thank you, Mayor. That's the end of my report.
Thank you very much, Councillor Reynolds. Happy to pass on the information as you've spoken tonight about that letter in regard to the Afghani situation. Thank you for your reports. Any other reports from councillors? Councillor De Pieri.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just before the most recent lockdown, I had the opportunity to go and visit the food hub at the Ethnic Communities Council, which is a wonderful example of collaboration between various groups and organizations in this community. And I must say, I was extremely impressed by the work being carried out there, which services not only ethnic communities, but all those who are in need of some support during these very testing and tough times. I must say that putting on my chef hat, I was also extremely impressed with the level of organization, the massive cool room, the great kitchen, and the facilities that are being created on that spot. And I was very pleased and gratified to hear that the people who worked there had received considerable help from our council staff. So it's good to know. On a more sort of concerned note, if you like, funding will run out by the middle of next year, but I suspect that needy people who need food, well, that won't go away, that will stay. And I think we will, at some point, plot some sort of path to make sure that this fabulous work and this investment that runs into many thousands of dollars is not going to waste. To set up a kitchen is not fully compliant with all the health requirements. Is not an easy thing to achieve. It's a very costly exercise. And I hope that we are able to find the funding and bring our advocacy to that organization. Such structures are so important. If we were to get more people in, to migrate into this community following the crisis in Afghanistan, as in fact, I want to support Councillor Reynolds here, has advocated indeed, even by the Premier of South Australia. He's not a hothead that wakes up in the morning with a a plan of some sort. He spoke very considerately this morning on radio, advocating more Afghani people to this country. And I think that just limiting it to, I think the latest was 3,000 souls, that's just absolutely mean. And I think we should advocate for more, especially as those people would be excellent. Many come from farming communities, which is exactly what Councillor Milne was saying before. And again, talking about farming and agriculture, I again had the opportunity to update myself with the TAFE Smart Farm. It's a serious thing. I mean, sometimes when you look at these things from the outside, you might think that it is a little bit of a dicky thing with people having a bit of a good time, sort of cavorting around the groves there. That's a very serious enterprise. And it's large, it's very well kept, it's impressive, and I understand that we missed out on funding last year. I've seen their plans for the future. They're commendable. They're fantastic. And as we look at what categories of people are needed in this community, apart from
About
farm-
1 minute left,
Yep,
Councillor
yep. Thank you,
DePieri.
Mr. Mayor. Just I'll
No
wrap it up.
worries. It's
We do
okay.
need among clerks and health workers, construction workers, chefs. Indeed, we do need people qualified to work in the agricultural horticultural field, as was demonstrated by most recent figures for that came out in relation to the Wimmera Mallee. So I think again our roles as advocacy as advocate for the tape farm, I think is something that I will encourage you all to partake in and to adopt with enthusiasm, as that organisation really deserves strong moral and practical support. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you very much for your report, Councillor DePieri. Are there any other reports from councillors? Thank you very much for your very comprehensive reports, everybody. Very appreciative of that. We'll now move on to item 10, responses to councillor questions, and item 10.1, the question from Councillor Milne last meeting. Oh, sorry. We'll go back. We've had a mover and a seconder, but we haven't had a vote on all our work that we've done through the month. So I think we need to go back to that. So the mover was Councillor Eckel, I believe, and the seconder was Councillor Healy. Nobody would like to speak against the motion. I will now put the motion. All those in favour? Thank you, councillors. I can see all your hands. The motion is carried. Thank you, Mr. Parham, for pulling me up on that one. We now move to item 10.1, which is the answer to Councillor Milne's question from last month on the Murrayville Community Radio Station. Have you got to have a look at that, Councillor Milne?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Happy with that explanation, but still sad to see that radio station and the connection to the community go.
Thank you for bringing that question to us too, Councillor Milne. It is very disappointing. We now move on to item 10.2, which is a question from Councillor Ian Arney, sale of unused land. You've had a chance to look at the answer to that question, Councillor Arney?
I don't know why it was telling me it was off mute. Sorry about that. I was trying to organise power. Yes, I'm happy with that response. The fact that it's still being looked into and that it's not a simple task. But I'm pleased that it will be looked into and that eventually, hopefully, we will retire some roads and reduce our expenditure on maintaining them. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Arney. We now move on to item 11, which is Councillor Questions. Do we have Councillor Questions? Councillor Eckel, Councillor Milne, Councillor Wood. Was there another hand? And Councillor Power. I will move to Councillor Eckel for his question.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Mayor, I've got 4 questions, and I'll wait at the end of each question for a response if it's necessary. Has council given consideration to writing to the Victorian Minister for Industry Support and Recovery, requesting support for the local hospitality industry?
I will pass that over to Mr. Hawson.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, thanks for the question. We haven't written specifically in regard to that. We have advocated through our COVID recovery plan for activities to support. However, if it's council's wish, we can certainly do that correspondence.
Thank you, Mr. Hawson. Mr. Mayor, I'd like that raised at the next forum, if we could. Thank you.
No, that noted, Councillor Eckel.
Also, I'm concerned that with the undeniable population growth of South Mildura and the developments within the close proximity to Lake Hawthorn, we don't have specific growth data for Cabarita and areas outside the current development area. Can council investigate a means of developing such data?
I'll pass that over to Mr. Horson again. Thank you, Mark.
Happy to take that on notice. We can certainly look at that. We do have higher level data that indicates the likely growth, but we'll take it on notice and get back to Councillor Eccles specifically about that one.
Thank you.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes.
Councillor Arnie's reappeared. I was just going to say we seem to have lost Councillor Arnie.
Thank you, Councillor Milne. We've got him back and appreciate the input there. I'll go back to you, Councillor Eccles.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Mayor, our local tourism industry should be concentrating at this time about developing unique and marketable visitor offerings to make the most of an anticipated post-COVID-19 tourism boom, we would hope. Instead, we are debating whether we should be enduring lockdown. Once again, there seems to be a hiatus in respect to the Victorian Tourism Review draft coming to the council, or coming to our notice anyway. Can we get a definitive time for its arrival?
Thank you for the question, Councillor Eccles. I'll ask Mr. Parham to respond to that one.
Thank you, Councillor Eccles. I'm currently liaising with the state at the moment and trying to organise a time, hopefully early in September, for the project team from the state government to present to council on the current status of that review and the subsequent timelines.
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, I'm really concerned because 2019, the review panel was here. They keep on we keep on stalling things because of the COVID situation, but we're all in lockdown. We're all working from home. I don't think there should be this delay on this Victorian Tourism Review, which is going to be so important. And we, as all councillors know, we have to consider paying membership fees too, and that's on hold as well, thankfully, until such time as we have a look at this review and see where it goes. So it's an important issue, and here we are waiting until September for further detail. From my perspective, it's not good enough, but thanks, Mr. Parham, for the work that you're doing in chasing it up. Mr. Mayor, respecting that council may wait, and here we go again with the lockdown issue, may wait until the state lockdown is over before we have our official opening day of the Mildura Sporting Complex, which is quite understandable. With recent events that's happened recently, I think if we could consider, and this could come to a forum for council discussion, inviting Eddie Betts and the Richmond Football Club President Peggy O'Neill to be present at the opening of the Mildura Sporting Complex. And if we want them to play an official role, well, that's councillors' decision. But Eddie Betts was one of the subjects included in an AFL 7-part documentary series, Making Their Mark, which addresses some of the racism faced by players. And we need to lift this the profile of this subject matter. And Eddie has also been touted as possibly working for the AFL in that area. So that'd be good too if we could get a little bit of a jump on that. And in keeping with our close relationship with the Richmond Football Club through the Mildura Sporting Complex development stage, it would be appropriate, I think, to include their club president, Peggy O'Neill. The Australian Financial Review has named her in its list of top 100 women of influence. And I believe it would be an amazing presence to have them both here on the day. So just something, I don't need anybody, I don't need a manager or a Mr. Mayor. I just think that if it could be brought up for consideration at our next forum.
We'll very much take that on notice, Councillor Eccles, and work through that. Thank you very much for bringing those up. That was all, Councillor Eccles. Yep. And now we have Councillor Milne. If you have your questions now.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I asked a question at the last council meeting regarding housing land lots available in Orimple, Nichols Point and Redcliffs. I received an answer, a reasonably comprehensive answer, but it didn't give the figures for those areas. I know land in Nichols Point is at a premium. Block of land selling there recently for $412,000. It had a reserve of $315,000. Can I please have a report come back to council on the amount of land that is available now to sell or subdivide for housing in those areas. That's Nichols Point, Orimple and Redcliffs. I'm not interested in Mildura South. I'm interested in the other areas that people want to live. And along with that, I'd also like to know if we actually track land availability and sales, which dictates where we move next with our planning to make sure we've got enough land for the future.
Thank you for the question, Councillor Milne. I'll pass that over to Mr. Hawson. Sorry, Mr. Jenkins.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Mr. Milne, for the question, Councillor Milne. Yes, we're in the process of doing a review on Mildura East, but I'll give you some specific feedback about those 3 particular locations about land availability. We'll probably have a clearer picture, as indicated in our previous advice, around availability once Mildura East strategic framework's been completed. But I'll see what I can do for you in the interim.
Thank you very much. Also, can I raise the Nathan Cork playground issue for a council forum? The residents recently sent a petition into council. They're not happy with the bare piece of land, and I've been down there and it does look terrible. And I'd like to see some more discussion on this issue and see a win-win resolution to that issue if it's possible.
Thank you for the question, Councillor Milne. Ms. Whelan, would you like to take that one?
Thanks, Mayor. I think the question was, can it be brought back to a forum for discussion,
Yeah.
which I'm assuming it can be.
Thank you very much for that. Also, I don't know if councillors are aware or council staff, but the government is proposing a 50% state windfall gains tax on land rezoning values. And could we have that discussed at forum? Because that's about land that's rezoned for housing, and the government's going to require the owners of that land to pay 50% tax on their capital gain on that land. This could have a huge impact on development and land prices, and I think we need to have some discussion about that as a council, and maybe then send some sort of correspondence back to the state government.
Thank you for the question, Councillor Milne. I'll pass that across to Mr. Hawson.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, we've had a high-level briefing through the MAV with regarding this issue, and it is certainly legislation that is on the radar, and it's something that we aim to bring back to council probably in a forum sooner than later, because it is scheduled to go to Parliament. I'd also suggest councillors may want to have a discussion with our local state member with regard to advocating a position on this particular matter, because it will significantly impact, particularly on rural councils, and particularly those that have a number of developments on the books. So it's certainly an important issue.
Thank you for that, Mr. Hawson. Much appreciated. I've also been approached in regards to the heavy traffic again on the Calder Highway between Orimple and Redcliffs, and the need for a highway upgrade, be that passing lanes or duplication. Our major transport routes are under pressure and arguably not up to standard. I think if they were a car, you'd be saying they've probably got a couple of flat tyres and not roadworthy and probably ready for a canary. But I think we need to have a look at that again. So could we have that come to a forum to update councillors on it, and maybe look at where the priority is for the duplication of the highway, because it's just getting increasingly heavy, the traffic out there.
Happy to look at that come to a forum, Councillor Milne. Thank you.
Got 2 quick ones to go. First one is the deep cleaning costs for businesses. A number of businesses in our community, when there was a COVID incident in Mildura, had to deep clean their premises because somebody attended that premise. Now, the cost of that is huge. It's in the thousands of dollars. and those businesses have basically had to bear that themselves. And I'm wondering if we can, again, have a discussion or bring that to forum, but or approach the state government for some serious assistance for those businesses, because it's not their doing. They just happen to be the business that somebody visited. And on top of having to close, they've also got all these other costs, and the costs to those businesses are huge through no fault of their own. So I'd like to at least see some discussion on that.
Thank you for the question, Councillor Milne. I'll pass that across to Mr. Hawson.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, happy to work through our Mildura Economic Development unit to work on what support is available in those circumstances and get their thoughts on what advocacy might be necessary.
Yeah, thank you for that. And the last one is at the end of, well, in confidential business, we've got items of confidential business that will be being looked at to be released from that confidentiality. And without getting into that confidential part, can we have a bit of a deeper dive on items from the past? Because there's so many items. I think I would like to see a lot more items come up to be made public, particularly going back years, even decades, because there's a lot of information there, and I think some of it could be safely released. So I'm just asking if we can be more open, more transparent, and just have a look at that issue a bit deeper and go back a little bit further in history.
Thank you for the question, Councillor Milne. Mr. Parham, would you like to take that one?
Yeah, thank you very much for the question. There's two components to the answer. In part, yes, we can have a deeper dive and look back. However, we also need to be aware of any provisions or any clauses that were in any particular contracts of the day, and also looking at any particular council resolutions as well, where a decision may have been made and it was to be determined to be kept confidentially in perpetuity as well. So we will be able to strike a balance in there. So in part, yes, but it will depend on any specific clauses.
No, happy with that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you for the questions, Councillor Milne. Thank you for the answer, Mr. Parham. Councillor Wood.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll keep it short. Just a quick few ones that I've already spoken about. Can we get an update on what the COVID money is being spent on, and do people in need have access to this support?
Thank you, Councillor Wood. Mr. Parham.
Thank you, through you, Mayor. So at this point in time, there's $120,000 that forms a part of the current year budget, which has been allocated to COVID, but at this point it hasn't been, I guess, sub-allocated, for want of a better word. Obviously, there's quite a lot of pain which is being felt at the moment, whether that's from businesses affected by lockdowns. We're seeing sporting seasons cancelled, community groups can't have meetings, can't raise funds, and so on. So we're acutely aware of that, and also the residential hardship. So we're looking to have a discussion with councillors at the September forum, and at this stage propose to put a resolution forward or put a report forward at the September council meeting to allocate this money, plus also implement any other actions that councillors resolve as well. So it is something we're acutely aware of and working on.
Thank you, Mr. Parham. Back to you, Mr. Wood.
Thank you for that. And obviously, from all councillors, lockdown 7 is another emotional, physical, and financial toll on everyone. So stay strong. Can we look at letting some community groups to paint murals on the walls of the water tanks down at the Autumnell Lakes? Could be an amazing backdrop to the water park, and already a great space that is used by the community in such force with lockdown as well. It's been a huge space for people to use and a relief in these tough times.
Thank you for the question, Councillor Wood. Mr. Jenkins, would you like to take that one?
Yes, through you, Mr. Mayor, and thanks for the question. Council has done some work previously with Lorimer Water on the pumping station next to the rowing club, and they did some work there as part of the riverfront stage 1. So we could have certainly approached Lorimer Water again, do potentially some artwork on the tanks. I think you mean in the ones referring to in the actual filtration.
Yeah, it'd be a
Yep,
bit behind Bobby and me, which has already got a great mural on their shipping container.
So we can certainly approach Lorimer Water and see what the opportunities are there with community to do some more similar to what we did at the pumping station.
Thank you for that. And just one last one. Are our council or our members of parliament looking at a different system besides regional and metro when it comes to potential lockdowns? I suggest a third tier of rural, which would allow our region to stay open in these times and allow our community to flourish.
Thank you for the question, Councillor Wood. I'll pass that over to Mr. Hawson.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I had a very brief discussion with our local member surrounding this, and certainly our local member, Ali Cupper, is aware of that issue, and we plan to write formally to Ms. Cupper to advocate for something in a middle ground, and I'm sure the government is very much aware of this. It might need some further discussion with councillors to firm up once we've had those initial discussions about what that would actually look like in our community. But certainly Ms. Cupper was open to receiving some correspondence from council surrounding this particular issue.
Thank you, Mr. Hawson. That was all, Councillor Wood.
Yeah, just thank you for that, and hugely important, if not now, for the future. I'm sure we're not going to be out of this shortly, or it's not going to reoccur at any time. So projecting for the future is a great thing. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Wood. Councillor Power.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Good evening. Through you, Mr. Mayor, I have a question, a nice brief one, but no less important. Much of the angst around the fortnightly bin collection is due to disposable nappies that can fill up those red bins extremely quickly. Now, on that, could I please request a report for the detailed costing of a cloth nappy rebate trial? And could I please request that report to come back to us in time for the next council meeting? Thank you.
Thank you for the question, Councillor Power. I think Ms. Whelan will take that one.
Yeah, through you, Mayor. Yes, we can certainly do that, and it's probably timely because we'll be coming back to the councillors with an update on the 3-bin system at the same time. So we can certainly have those conversations and present a report.
Fantastic. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ms. Whelan. That was your only question, Councillor Power?
That is, Mr. Mayor. Thank you very much.
No other questions from councillors?
Could I get one more in, Mr. Mayor?
Yeah, me
please?
too.
Yes, yeah, yes, I can. Ian hasn't had a go, so I'll go to Ian first and then back to
Chairman.
Councillor Milne and Councillor Eckel. Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm just looking for the appropriate information. Sorry about that. I did have it open. Something that I've actually raised quite a few questions recently and asked for reports, and I've been very happy with the responses I've been given. One of the questions was around the procurement policy and how it encourages new registered contractors to apply for work and supply contracts with MRCC, and whether they are at a disadvantage because of no previous history with MRCC. I was very satisfied with the answer, and also part of the discussion and the response was that the procurement policy is currently being reviewed and that there may be a potential to encourage prospective new contractors to come in and be a part of discussion around what the new process will be with regards to putting in for council tenders. And I just think that that opportunity is going to be great. I hope I've explained it correctly, but I'm more than satisfied with the answer. There are quite a few other questions that I've asked, and I guess my question is now, can I table those reports because I would like them to be a part of the meeting? They've been distributed to all the other councillors previously. If I can't table them at this meeting, then I will request that they be tabled at the next meeting. But I would like them to be put out in the public domain so that people in our community can see the questions I've asked. If I was to go through them all right now, it would take us probably a couple of hours. But I think it's quite important that people have access to the questions and the information, because it is relatively significant as far as I'm concerned with regards to the way MRCC operates and our staff operate, and the huge job they do in our municipality that goes, I guess, unrecognised. That's what a lot of my questions are about, and I think it's about time that we did our best to demonstrate exactly what our staff do and the huge benefit they provide to people.
So, Councillor Arnie, I've just been informed that it'd be fine if we tabled them for the next meeting with the answers, if that's okay with you.
Yep, okay, thank you.
And very appreciative of the questions. Thank you, Councillor Arnie. We'll go to Councillor Milne now.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Could we have a report back to Council on the recent airport VCAT hearing, outlining the costs and the outcome, please?
Thank you for the question, Councillor Milne, and I think I'll pass it over to Mr. Parham. Sorry, to Ms. Whelan.
Through you, Mayor, yes, we can provide a report back to councillors on that.
Thank you. Councillor Milne. Councillor Eccles.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, further to Councillor Wood's issue in regards to a mural on the tank, down there near the riverfront, he might be interested to note, and we can discuss this when it comes up at the forum, but the Chaffey Trail have a proposed tour of the riverfront, and he might not know this, but back in the 1920s, that was the site of our first swimming pool. And there are fabulous historical photos that of that nature in that particular area. So it just shows the heritage and the history of once again. And I think it's a great idea, Councillor Wood, and I'd love to see those photos up there and part of our tour. It'll be great. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just for interest's sake.
Oh no, I agree, Councillor Eccles. There's been an absolute takeoff in murals around the city, and a depiction of the old original baths would be quite fantastic. Just as an aside from me.
Yeah.
Thanks again for.
Unfortunately, I was too young to swim in those pools at the time, so.
I think most of us are here, Councillor Wood. I thank you very much for all your questions. Is that everybody's happy with this now, and we'll move on? Yep. Thank you. We now move to item 14, management reports. With a item 12. I'm getting a bit excited tonight, everybody. It's Wednesday after all. Item 12 is notice of motions, and there are none. Item 13 are petitions, joint letters and deputations, and there are none. Thank you, Mr. Parham. Everybody needs a good wingman. We now move on to item 14, management reports. 14.1, councillor expense report, the 1st of April this year to the 30th of June, with a recommendation that council note the contents of this report, which details councillor expenses for this period. Do I have a mover for that motion? Councillor Healy, a seconder. Councillor Power. Do I have anyone who wants to speak to the motion? Councillor Healy.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. In this report, I would just like to acknowledge and thank Council for the opportunity to attend 2 conferences in the last quarter, which was the Australian Local Government National Assembly and the Australian Local Government Women's Association Conference. They were important networking opportunities. I finally got to meet a number of people I sit with on the Ministerial Advisory Committee, and it was a real pleasure in Canberra to see our 2 motions, the rural rate divide and the environmental water allocation, get passed on the national stage. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Healy. I went backwards on that one. I was supposed to call for objectors first. Are there any objectors? No. Would anybody else like to talk to the motion? I think we've all had a bit of a crack already. I'd now put the motion. All those in favour? I can see all your hands. The motion is carried. Thank you, councillors. We now move on to item 14.2, with a recommendation, 4.2, which is the adoption of the Mildura South Neighbourhood Activity Centre Master Plan. This is the final draft with a recommendation that Council adopt the response to the submission summary table as presented, adopt the Mildura South Neighbourhood Activity Centre Master Plan final draft with modifications in accordance with the recommended response to submission summary table as presented, and request authorisation for the Minister for Planning to prepare a Mildura Planning Scheme amendment to implement the recommendations of the finalised Mildura South Neighbourhood Activity Centre Master Plan. Do I have a mover for that motion? Councillor Eckel. Do I have a seconder? Councillor De Pieri. Do I have anyone who'd like to object to the motion? Would anybody like to speak to the motion? So Councillor Milne was first, and then Councillor Eckel, and then Councillor Reynolds.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to say that we finally got to a good outcome on this, but I must express some frustration that it dates back to 2014, and it's taken a long time to get to this point. And I think there's a challenge there for us as a council to again look at some of our planning processes and try and get to the end point a lot quicker. And so I think there's some learnings to be had, and we need to look at that.
Thank you, Councillor Milne. Appreciate your input there. Councillor Eckel.
Mr. Mayor, yeah, thank you for that, and thanks to Councillor Milne there too, because I think we've both been through the ringer in regards to this particular issue. But what a fantastic result! I have great pleasure in moving the adoption. I don't know whether you want me to talk to the adoption. Have you asked for objectors, Mr. Mayor? You didn't have your mic on.
There were no objectors, so I'm happy for you to talk to it at this point, Councillor Eckel.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have great pleasure in moving the adoption of this particular item. I am so pleased to see a final resolution between the proponents and Council on what will be a great community asset for what I believe will be a satellite suburb of some distinction, and I've been talking about that for some years now on Council and the opportunities out there at South Mildura. I believe the revised neighbourhood centre offers a point of difference that was required in the short term, with some quarters having concerned about it being too close to central, the shopping centre. But a key factor to me is the outdoor dining and space for future events in this particular landmark. It is unfortunate that we don't have the population density of Cabarita and surrounds, and we need to rectify that element, and I've brought that up previously in Council today, but of our population data there, because I believe with the already known 2,000 population growth in the immediate vicinity, the Neighbourhood Activity Centre will be justified. Also, it must be said how fortunate our municipality is to have the developments of this nature during this time of the pandemic. And we spoke at length at the recent forum about the wonderful layout of this precinct, and in particular the outdoor space where fresh food can be on offering. And I think that if we need anything in this particular municipality, it's an event space that offers the opportunity of having fresh food in its environs, and I think that that's what we hopefully that we'll find down at the powerhouse eventually. But no, hats off to the proponents. They've gone through well to hell and back, they would probably say, and but at the end result is magnificent, not only for the future investors in that particular area of Mildura, but also a major investment for our community.
Thank you, Councillor Eckel. Councillor Reynolds.
Thank you, Mayor Modica. I echo the sentiments of Councillor Eckel and Councillor Milne about this particular project. It's fantastic. Everything that Councillor Eckel just said about it is absolutely true. It'll be an asset Mildura, an asset to the people who are lucky enough to live in that area and to be able to use that facility. I think congratulations to the planning department on this. One of the sort of criticisms that's come up is the time it's taken, but perhaps it's the time it's taken and the level of consultation that the planning department have entered into with both the community and the developers that's had such a fantastic result for this area. We've got a brilliant development there. One of the things that hasn't been mentioned so far is the walkability of that area. So wherever you are, if you're living in that area, you'll be able to walk to that facility and enjoy all the aspects of that facility, and that has so many knock-on effects for the health and well-being of the people that live in that area. Being able to walk to an area to enjoy the things that are available to them there is fantastic, and it's great that that was taken into consideration in that development. So, yep, echo everything that the other councillors have said. Congratulations to the planning department and to the people that have been involved in bringing this to Mildura. I think it'll be an asset going forward. So, thanks very much.
Thank you, Councillor Reynolds. If there are no other councillors who would like to speak to it, I will now put the motion. All those in favour? Thank you, councillors. The motion is carried unanimously. We now move on to item 14.3, adoption of the Aboriginal Recognition Policy CP 058. With a recommendation that Council adopt the updated Aboriginal recognition policy as presented. Do I have a mover for that? Councillor Arney and Councillor Healy for a seconder. Does anybody want to object to the motion? Would anybody like to speak to that motion before we put it? Councillor Healy and Councillor Eckel.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just want to acknowledge the work of Acting General Manager Community, Mr. Jenkins, for his work with the Aboriginal Advisory Committee, Action Committee, and with the Chair, Thelma Chili, and the Deputy Chair, Sharon Johnson, the work that's gone into this, updating it, making it more contemporary, but more importantly, what a dynamic group the Aboriginal Action Committee are now under this new leadership, and with Mr. Jenkins' support and real passion for getting this together and making the recognition policy and the group as proactive and as empowered as possible. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Healy. Councillor Eckel.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, I recall we did some information on welcome to country and acknowledgement when the policy was first developed several years ago. And I believe a booklet or pamphlet guide that covers all the aspects of the updated policy would be extremely useful for both staff and the community. And now that Council has passed this policy update, I just wonder, could Council prepare a document as suggested in conjunction with the AAC? And indeed, this could be considered also as an action in our Council plan going forward.
Thank you very much, Councillor Eckel. We'll take that on notice now and work through that in the next little while. Appreciate your input there. There were no objectors, so I'll now put the motion. All those in favour? Thank you very much, councillors. That's carried unanimously as well. So we now move on to item 14.4, which is the Procurement Australia Contract 2306/0843, Library Collections, Furniture, Equipment and Associated Requirements, with a recommendation that Council accept the recommendations of Procurement Australia to various suppliers for library collections, furniture, equipment and associated requirements to take effect until June 2023, with the option of 2 further 12-month extensions for the sum of up to $2 million plus applicable GST. Point 2, note that the expenditure under this contract in accordance with Council's proposed budget and expenditure in future years will remain in accordance with the approved budget allocations. Do I have a mover for that motion? Councillor Milne, a seconder. Councillor Reynolds. Does anybody want to object to the motion? Would anybody like to talk to the motion? I now put the motion. All those in favour? Thank you very much, councillors. That's passed unanimously. We now move to item 14.5, 2022 general revaluation, with a recommendation that council, pursuant to the provisions of the Valuation of Land Act 1960, resolve to cause a general valuation of all rateable property and non-rateable livable property in the municipal district to be made by Stephen Lush, returnable by the 30th of May 2022 for the purposes of the Local Government Act 1989 and the Fire Services Property Levy Act in 2012. Do I have a mover for that motion? Councillor Arney, a seconder. Councillor Healy. Does anybody want to object to that motion? Would anybody like to speak to the motion? Councillor De Pieri.
Perhaps, Mr. Mayor, given that this is quite a complex affair and people are watching us taking these decisions, might it not be appropriate that perhaps one of our senior officers give us a bit of an explanation of how this reappraisal of the rates and the process in which it will occur. Sometimes this we rush through these decisions, and I feel, if you think it's appropriate, elucidation on this at this point in time.
I appreciate you bringing that up, Councillor De Pieri, and I think General Manager Parham could give us a quick outline of the process that this entails. Thank you, Councillor De Pieri. Thank you, Mr. Parham.
Thank you, through the Mayor. There's a number of elements of this. As I think people would mostly be aware, council generates the majority of its revenue to fund council services and activities through rates, and the council rates is approximately 60% of council's overall revenue. In order to raise rates, this is done in accordance with the Local Government Act, and it's the methodology behind rates and so on is something that's been of, I guess, great debate in recent times, and perhaps continue to will be, but it's under state legislation. The generation of rates, or the calculation of rates, also is influenced, or a core factor of its calculation is the capital improved value of properties. Prior to approximately 3 years ago, valuations occurred every second year, but then there was a change made to the Valuation Act by the state government, which now means that valuations occur on an annual basis. As part of that valuation process, we need to advise the community that we're going to go through that revaluation process, hence this council report. The valuations are undertaken, and that data in turn feeds our budget process for next year. Over the top of this, we also have the state government rate cap. So in terms of the amount of rates that we raise to fund council, that also needs to sit and be within the rate cap, which is also prescribed by the state government. As part of our a process of levying rates and sending out rate notices to ratepayers across the municipality, we also collect the fire services levy. This levy again is determined by the state government. We collect that levy, and 100% of that is then returned to the state government. So it is a complex process. There's a number of pieces of legislation that are involved, and the timing of it and the sequencing of events on an annual basis is quite complex. But it's what we need to undertake, and as I say, the rates are a significant portion of the revenue to council. So I hope that assists in some way, but it is quite complex.
Thank you, Mr. Parham. Did you want to make a statement, Councillor De Pieri?
Just another clarification, because I failed maths at school, and logic, I go on instinct, and logic is not always on my assisting me. But if there is a cap, and we all know that our properties in Mildura have increased, they sell in no time. We know that the value of properties has gone up, but there is a cap. So why would you bother doing a review if you can't go anywhere with it anyway? So how do you reconcile the fact that a property may have gone up astronomically, but you have a cap, and therefore you can't go beyond a certain limit. So that's the point where I really can't, in my simple head, I can't make sense of it.
Yep, sure.
I'm happy for Chris to answer that, but we might have to explore that at another time. But I'll go on with that, Chris, if you can.
Okay, so just very briefly, the revaluation is something that we have to undertake every year under law. The rate cap determines the amount of total revenue that council can raise through rates or through the charging of council rates. So what happens is that the amount of money that council can raise through rates is X dollars. There might be, say, 29,000 properties within the municipality, and the X dollars is divided by the number of properties, and the valuation and the capital improved value is a component of that. So in short, because someone's property value goes up, doesn't necessarily mean that they will pay more or less in council rates. What we have to consider, and through the use of the rating system and the differential rates that we have, it's a redistribution of that revenue raising across the accessible properties. But I'd be happy to provide more information at a council forum, but also for the general community up on our website, on the council website. There's information on the website and a brochure up there which explains how the rates are calculated and distributed. So I hope that helps.
Thank you, Mr. Palmer. I noticed, yes, Glenn, I noticed you had your hand up. Thank you for the question, Councillor De Pieri. I hope that clears a few things up.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. My question is brief. It relates to the fire services property levy. And does the government contribute anything financially to the costs of revaluation, or to council actually having to collect that levy for them?
I'll pass that on to General Manager Power and Mr. Milne.
Through the Mayor, yes, there is an administration fee that council is recompensed from the state government for that. I don't know the figure at hand, but I certainly can provide that to you.
Thank you for that.
Thank you, Councillor Milne. Thank you, Mr. Palmer. I think Councillor Eccles had his hand up, and then Councillor Healy.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Mayor, in the report under financial, it's got the costs involved with the revaluation process already built into council's budget, and the State Revenue Office will reimburse council 50% of the cost of the general valuation. However, you know, I think that it would be nice if we've got a ballpark figure, because over the years these re-evaluations have cost us more money with the changes in government regulations now that they're going to be done more often too. So I think the community should know, rather than dig into the budget papers, around about ballpark figure, if Mr. Parham's got it there with him, that council is up for this re-evaluation, please.
No, not on hand, Councillor Eccles, but we'll take that on notice to get back to all councillors.
Thank you.
Councillor Healy.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and I thank Councillor De Pieri for asking that question, because I think it's really important. And I hope a lot of people are watching, but I think it's very important for our customers to hear about our rate strategy and how we have to do these valuations by law. But I'd like to ask Mr. Parham, are we not up for a rates review policy shortly?
Mr. Parham, if you'd like to take that one.
Through the Mayor, thank you for that question. Council does have a revenue and rating plan, and that plan at this stage goes through to 2023, as in 30 June 2023. So we will be commencing the process very shortly to undertake the consultation and community engagement to develop a new revenue and rating plan for the following 4 years. So yes, that process will recommence very shortly.
And one more question, Mr. Mayor. I look forward when that rate review occurs that we actually look at properties under a conservation covenant, and having some sort of rate relief or no rates for people who actually give their properties over to the future in perpetuity. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Healy. We'll make a note of that. All right, everybody, I will now, there was no objectors. I will now put the motion. All those in favour? Thank you, councillors. That motion has carried. We'll move on to item 14.6, the adoption of S11A instruments of appointment and authorisation, with a recommendation that council, in the exercise of the powers conferred by section 147.4 of the Planning and Environment Act 1987, resolve that the following members of council staff be appointed and authorised as set out in the instruments as presented. Jay Smith, Acting Environmental Sustainability Coordinator, and Annette Zima, Acting Manager Community Futures. The instrument comes into force immediately following a resolution of council and remains in force until council determined to vary or revoke them, and the instruments be sealed. Do I have a mover for that motion? Councillor Reynolds, and a seconder, Councillor Milne. Would anybody like to object to that motion? Would anybody like to speak to the motion? I'll now put the motion. All those in favour? Thank you very much, councillors. I can see you all voting. That is carried. And we move to item 14.7, which is the Audit and Risk Committee meeting from 1/2021-22, minutes and summary from the 14th of July, with a recommendation that council note the confidential minutes of the Audit and Risk Committee meeting as stated. Do I have a mover for that motion? Councillor Healy, a seconder. Councillor Milne. Would anybody like to object to the motion? Would anybody like to speak to the motion? I will put Councillor Healy.
Sorry, just a quick question. Is that a conflict of interest that I move that motion, seeing I'm actually on that committee?
No, Councillor Healy, you're very, very happy for you to do that. That's fine.
Okay. Well, I'll take advantage of this opportunity to just say, again, as I always say, how impressed I am by this Audit and Risk Committee, the calibre of the people on it, and also an announcement shortly about a new addition to the Audit and Risk Committee, which I'm very pleased about too. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Healy. There are no objectors, so I'll now put the motion. All those in favour? Thank you very much, councillors. I can see your hands. That is carried unanimously as well. We now move to item 14.8, the adoption of the Playground Strategy 2021-2026, with a recommendation that council adopt the Playground Strategy as presented. Do I have a mover for that motion? Councillor Milne and Councillor Power for a seconder. Would anybody like to object to the motion? Would anybody like to speak to the motion? Councillor Power and Councillor Milne. Councillor Power?
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. First of all, I just want to commend the staff, the team who put this together, for your level of consultation with the public and for listening to the input from the community. I especially want to mention priority 2 in the plan, the approach to risk management that considers benefits of challenging play experiences, which is something I found over time that's really important to community, that the kids actually have a chance to play with something and make a choice to keep themselves safe, really important in a playground. Also, the focus on informal play spaces and integrating naturally constructed things to play with. And recycled materials. I also want to commend the team for listening to the community about using existing natural elements in playgrounds like hills, logs, rocks, things that encourage unstructured play opportunities. Well done. Just wanted to make that public. That just an absolutely brilliant job. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Councillor Power. Councillor Milne.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd echo those comments as well. And playgrounds are great value for money in our community. We've all, well, anyone that's grown up in the community has used them. They were probably pretty rugged in my day, but they've got significantly better, and we've got some magnificent playgrounds, and this looks at a way to, you know, maintain them as being magnificent. I was concerned when we had this strategy presented to us about making sure that the community understood that they were getting good value for money out of it. Now, staff have done a good job of explaining that on pages 24 and 25. So I'm very pleased to see that, because this is our rates at work, and it does take a lot of money to maintain these play areas, particularly like areas like the water park on the riverfront, but also all of our small playgrounds. But I believe that it is money well spent, and particularly in the environment that we're in today, if you can run across the road to a park with your kids, grandkids, whatever, and have them play in a park, I think you really appreciate that time. So good work by our staff on putting this all together. And to our community, make sure you utilise those parks. They are great. Council puts a lot of time into it, and it is a good way to spend a bit of quality time with your children and grandchildren. So yeah, happy to support this, and it's a great piece of work.
Thank you, Councillor Milne. As there were no objectors, I will now put that motion. All those in favour? Thank you very much, councillors. I can see all your hands. That's carried unanimously as well. And we now move on to item 14.9, use and development of a dwelling at 747 Ontario Avenue, Mildura, with a recommendation, and I'll read the condensed version there, that council, having caused notice of planning application number 005-2021-00000097.001 to be given under section 52 of the Planning and Environmental Act, and having considered all the matters required under section 60 of the Planning Environment Act, decide to issue a notice of decision to refuse to grant a permit under the provisions of clause 35.07/1 and clause 35.07/4 of the Mildura Planning Scheme in respect of the land known and described as 747 Ontario Avenue, Mildura, for the use and development of a dwelling for the following reasons, as stated, point 1, 2, 3, 4. Do I have a mover for that motion? Councillor Healy moved. A seconder? Councillor De Pieri. Do I have an objector for that motion? Would anybody like to? You'd like to object, Councillor Milne?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Okay. Thank you, Councillor Milne. I will now ask Councillor Healy as the mover to open the debate.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. As per usual with these things, it's complicated, and there's emotional reasons for thinking it's a good idea to put a house on a property such as this. But the bottom line is, if it doesn't fit in with our plans, we shouldn't be approving these things. And I know that each application is very different, and there's different reasons why it can be approved but can't be approved. But these are policies that our council has voted on and put in place to make sure that we have orderly future planning and development in our municipality. And I think what I've learned in my short term on council is the more we go against our own plans that we've voted on, the more likely we are leading to lose our right to vote on planning decisions. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Healy. I will now ask Councillor De Pieri as the seconder to speak to the motion if they choose. You're still on mute, Councillor De Pieri.
Am I there? Can
Thank
you
you.
hear
I
me?
can hear you now, mate. That's fine.
Thank you. I second this motion, but and I do it out of duty, and for the same reasons that Councillor Healy has outlined. And these matters keep on coming back to us, and they're painful, and they are complicated, and they do have a lot to do with the technical reasons why we can't do certain things and we can't do other things. And so I will vote for the recommendation of the officers. But I also want to comment that I'm doing it with a really heavy heart, because I do believe that in a particular area of our city where you can see the sprawl and the development, this persistence, this insistence upon continuing to regard agricultural land where the future of it is in absolute doubt due to a multitude of reasons that everyone in the community is aware of, I find that this really, really a worrisome thing. And I've said to many of you in formal and informal conversations that we should disregard the fact that these planning matters come up regularly. We should proceed with a lot of care, but with some passion and intensity upon reviewing the relationship between where we put houses and where we do agriculture in the context of a climate that's changing economically and physically. I mean, the atmosphere, the cost of water, probably not this year. We've got plenty of water in the river, but there will come a time, don't you worry about that, that the price of water will go through the roof. So what is that? Because I think I will wrap it up, but I think it is time we invest in a long-term study which will have planners, economists, people involved in agriculture, and in what kind of city we want to have and what are our priorities. And to tease this out will take time, but I strongly urge everyone to start to reconsider that whatever decisions are imposed upon us in part by a bunch of people sitting in Melbourne who say, oh, that's agricultural land, horticultural land. I know we also have a role in that. It's not all one-way street, but we are pretty much always under the careful watch of Melbourne. If we put a foot wrong, they'll take our planning powers away. And I understand the threat, but I also urge everyone to start thinking laterally about these matters. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you very much, Councillor De Pieri. I will now ask Councillor Milne as the objector to speak to their objection. Thank you, Councillor Milne.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to ask a question first. We've had two speakers speak about a threat to council's powers. Can I ask, has council had any correspondence from the state government that can lay any substance to those statements?
I will pass that over to Mr. Hawson, I think. Thank you for the question, Councillor Milne.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Not in recent times.
Thank you for that answer.
Thank you, Mr. Hawson.
Look, this there are a whole lot of issues around this application, and I have trouble with comments or statements made in it that are part of the Act to avoid inappropriate rural residential development, to ensure that new dwellings will assist growing with an agricultural enterprise, to make sure or encourage the retention of productive agricultural land to ensure that non-agricultural uses do not adversely affect the use of land for agriculture, and understand all those issues. But then at the same time, when I drive down Ontario Avenue and have a look at the land, both sides of the road between 16th and 17th Street, there are huge areas of land that have been pulled out for housing in this very area. And in fact, they are part of the growth area, which the land that this house is on is part of that land as well. So we're actually going to allow farming land to be changed to housing land. And it happens in Mildura, it happens in Melbourne. If you fly over Melbourne, you've got some of the best farming land in the state. It's got housing developments all over it, creating urban spread, which our rules and regulations say that we should try and reduce or cease urban spread and concentrate on the developed areas that we've already got. So I guess that means building upward. But that doesn't happen in Melbourne and it doesn't happen here. I can take you to page 171. And the planning delegation report talks about this is particularly relevant when noting that there are existing residential accommodation options within close proximity to this site, such as the established and establishing areas of the Mildura South growth area to the northeast within a kilometre. This is actually part of that area. You don't have to go a kilometre. You just have to stand on the very land where they're proposing to build a house. So if you look at the way that that land is developed, the time frame, the land that this proposed, or where they're proposing to build this property, 3 to 5 years, it's going to be covered in houses anyway. So yes, you might be taking land out of production, very little land, but that land is all going to be taken out of long-term production. We've got plans for that. Council's put in huge drainage works to do that. We've got a plan to take it out to the airport overlay that sits along 17th Street. So you can't go right to 17th. I think it's a property or 2 properties back. But this is in that growth area. And to recommend that people maybe look at buying a block of land a little bit further down the road and spend $150,000 or whatever to then operate their property doesn't really make a lot of sense, given that they've got the land to build the property. The life expectancy of that property is probably 3 to 5 years. And while people might say, well, you can't speculate, well, we do speculate because we know it is going to be taken over with housing. We've got a plan for that. It's the long-term growth area. So we're sort of playing semantics here and saying it technically doesn't fit. Well, it does. It's not a prohibited use in this area because it is a growth area. And the
one minute, Councillor Milne. Sorry for butting in.
That's fine. The government has said that you can put houses in the growth area. So I just think that it's a fair ask. They want to operate their property for however long it takes. It's a family member that wants to build that house, and it's part of building in that area is you have to take into consideration the future residential use of the land and make sure you place it. That's in the guidelines where it won't interfere with future housing. So our guidelines recognise that in the first place, but we're saying, oh no, you can't put it there because it's going to take away valuable horticultural land. Well, which one is it? Our own rules are at conflict if we're saying that you can't put it there. So I have great trouble accepting that it's not a fair and reasonable use. And this is a decision that we're able to make. And I don't believe all this talk of threats from the government to take away planning powers has got anything to do with this. It's not an illegal use, and it's in a growth zone where we're able to make that decision. So I think it's fair that they ask that. So I'm voting against this motion.
Thank you, Councillor Milne. Right on your 5-minute mark. Would any other councillor like to speak to the motion? Councillor Reynolds.
Thank you, through you, Mr. Mayor. I think that councillors are very familiar with my position on planning issues and regarding what the zoning is and how we can talk about, planning applications and whether or not we should go against what our planning department has recommended for us. In this instance, we've got an existing set of zones, and we've got an existing set of rules and regulations, and this application simply doesn't apply in that area. But the other shortcoming of this application is that it's lacking a farm management plan. So if you are going to put in a fair income application to put a house on this land, perhaps you should present the farm management plan as requested by our planning department. and that simply hasn't been forthcoming, and that's forms part of this report. So the application is lacking, unfortunately, which is a bit disappointing. The other thing is that you know, to speculate that this land will be available in 3 to 5 years, you know, I think that really is, you know, plain speculation. We don't know that. It could be 25 to 30 years before this land becomes available for housing, and there could be many crops and much sort of valuable agriculture that is produced by that land between now and then, and you know, income for this area. So you know, 3 to 5 years is pure speculation. And finally, we talked about the planning that we hope to do as a council to talk about these zoning issues and to talk about whether or not there's some of the land that is now zoned as farming. In the future, we could think about rezoning that land in the light of climate change and water, and we are going to do that. But I think it's you know, behoven upon us as councillors to expect that any changes that we make to planning and to zoning and to the long-term plans for this region are respected by councillors to come, because you know, we're really passionate about making sure that this is a great place for people to live and that they can come here and do what they need to do in our town, so that the plans that we hope to make and rezoning that we hope to do, I would hope that councillors in the future would stick to that and respect that. So look, in that vein, I would like to stick to and respect the plans that we have with us at the moment, and hopefully we'll have a more sustainable and planned expansion in the future, because we as a council are pretty keen on that, and I think that we're all on the same page as far as that goes. So thanks, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Reynolds. Are there any other councillors that would like to speak against the motion? Councillor Eckel.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mine goes back 20 years. I'd be a hypocrite if I didn't vote against this recommendation, because it is appropriate. It's a new vineyards that have been placed on this particular property over the last few years. The land that is going to be deemed the title for the house. There's only old olive trees on it at the moment. You know, my philosophical view of taking up prime agricultural land with a house has always been at odds with the government, because the issue is that this is a lesser case because it's not so much land, but you know, they say it way back when we were doing the MOIA, where if you got 100 acres you couldn't put a house on it, like because he's taken up prime agricultural land. Well, in this instance, I know we're only talking about just over 4 hectares, but the philosophy still stands that I believe that you need a house on a land to look after the property in perpetuity. All right, the issues with this one is that you've got the urban growth coming in on it, but it's still not going to change. It still doesn't change my philosophical view in regards to that particular issue. So, you know, I'm not going to go on. Councillor Milne, I've followed Councillor Milne's stand. And it's probably the only thing that we've been mutual with over his 5 years, and then I've had it for 6 terms. So I can't, in all honesty, vote for this recommendation. I would be happy if because we see that at our last meeting, if you've spoken about to or against a motion, that you can still move an alternative motion, and I'd be happy if and I agree with Councillor Jody in regards to the farm management plan, and I would like if there's somebody interested in moving it, or I'll move that as an amendment, that we grant a planning permit on this land together with the farm management plan being provided to the planning department by the applicant on request, and I'll move that. as an amendment?
Just, I want to confer for a second, Councillor Eckel, if
Okay.
that's okay. So Councillor Eckel, you can present that to Councillor Healy and Councillor De Pieri to adopt that as part 2 or part 4, sorry, of the motion. Would you be prepared to accept that, Councillor Healy and Councillor De Pieri?
Mr. Mayor, I need more clarity on what Councillor Eckel is proposing.
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, I don't think it's in spirit of the original motion. Mine's not actually an amendment to the motion. It's I'm saying grant the permit. The motion is to not grant it. I'm saying grant the motion, but with the clause that a farm management plan is presented by the proponents.
Okay. Yeah, I don't think it's too far through the debate to be able to bring that. We have to continue the debate and vote on what we've moved and seconded and begun the debate with, Councillor Eckel. So sorry, we'll just have to proceed. If you've completed your talking against the motion, I'll ask for people to talk for or against again, and then we'll have to go through and vote on it.
I'd like another clarification on that. I don't know whether that's right.
Councillor Eckel, that's the information we've been given, and it's too late in the debate to bring that to the table. So is there any other councillors that'd like to speak for or against the motion? Councillor Arnie.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. As has been my stance in the past, I like to help people, and I'd like to do so in this case. But I guess the question I have is the fact that we have staff who are professionals who are employed to do a job and represent us, and they have requested additional information or made it clear that that information would be required, but wouldn't necessarily allow this application to go ahead, but it might put it in a better standing for it to go ahead. Now, something I struggle with is the fact that this information comes to us and we're supposed to make a decision on it. It's quite clear that staff wanted more information, they didn't get it. I think it makes it pretty simple to say that, relatively speaking, we should side with the professionals who are saying they don't have enough information. We have to go with the information, but also the direction they've given us. That's their job.
Thank you, Councillor Arnie.
It's certainly not for me to try and make a professional decision when it's not my background.
So thank you, Councillor Arnie. You're supporting the recommendation of the
Yes, I am.
Councillor De Pieri, I'm sorry, you can't have another go because we've already had, you've had a chance to talk. I will now offer the mic back to Councillor Healy to finish the debate.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And as the debate indicates, this is such a complex and fraught issue that we have to deal with over and over again because of the motion passed last year that rejected applications come to us for a decision. And I agree with Councillor Arnie that we are not the professionals. But I would just say in closing that this is not 3 to 5 or how many years in the future. This is now. And we have our planning strategies that are in place. And we or I'm sure Councillor Eckel, Councillor Milne in the past or other councillors voted on them. And I too look forward, as Councillor De Pieri mentioned, looking deeply into our planning strategies in the future, talking to the Minister about what we want and thinking about all the impacts it will have. But for now, we are responsible for an orderly planning and development of our community. And this is now, it's not the future. So yes, I support the motion. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the roundup there, Councillor Hilly. Thank you very much for the impassioned debate, and it does prove we're all very caring about our community in very different ways, and we get to tease it out through debate like this. I will now put the motion. All those in favour of the motion? All those against? The motion is carried 6-3. Once again, councillors, thank you very much for the debate. I know there's a lot coming up into the future at the next forum to tease this out even more, particularly on the back of a lot of the topics the councillors have brought up in regard to peri-urban planning, water, and sustainability through variable climate. So once again, I very much thank you for the debate and appreciate your tenderness in treating each other through that, because it can get a bit ornery. Don't you love using that word, ornery? Haven't used it for a while. All right, councillors, we move on to item 15, which is urgent business, and there is none. We move on to item 16, which is community questions, and there are none. We now move on to item 17, which is confidential business, and we have three items, 17.1, 17.2 and 17.3. 17.1 is a tender award for card fuel and associated products. Tender award 17.2 is provision for banking and bill payment services. And 17.3 is, as mentioned earlier by Councillor Milne, the release of confidential council reports. Do I have a mover to go into confidential? Councillor Wood, a seconder. Councillor Arnie. I'll put that motion. All those in favour? The motion is carried to go into confidential. I'd just like to thank everybody tonight for their time and their effort, all the staff. Thank everybody for watching live or tuning in later on. Looking forward to catching up at the next meeting in September. Thank you.